Hi, and welcome to the Days Gone podcast. I'm Claire Weaver, a screenwriter, author, and Days Gone fan, and this podcast is a place to discuss the game in all its glory, share my opinions, both popular and unpopular, and listen to me fangirl over one of the best games ever made. There will be spoilers ahead, so continue at your own risk. Welcome to the Freak Show. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with 626 Aussie about Iron Mike. Last week we discussed the nature of Iron Mike's so-called pacifism and what really happened at Sherman's camp. This week we're going to get into the treaty with the Rippers and why Iron Mike, a man supposedly all about justice, banished Skizzo instead of putting him on trial. So let's get into the Ripper Treaty and let's kind of, before we get to that, let's back up a little bit and talk about Skizzo and how he fits into...
Of course we're going to talk about Skizzo.
Well, I mean, he's an integral part of Lost Lake. He is kind of the opposite of Iron Mike.
And the yin to Mike's yang, or maybe the yang to Mike's yin, I'm not sure which one. But yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
And that's the thing is, like, he's the opposite, but he's the right-hand man. He is the head of security. And I do want to get into, you brought up a great point about how he's a lot more than just the head of security. Like he has a lot of other jobs and duties that he seems to fulfill, and a lot of power that he has. But Iron Mike allows it. Now you have Ricky right there, who is really smart, really capable, and really good at getting people to do stuff and getting through to people, communicating in a different way to Iron Mike. And yet she has almost no power. She kind of works under Iron Mike and does jobs, and obviously has a stake in how Lost Lake survives. But it's Skizzo who has power. And it's interesting because Skizzo is obviously such a fucking weasel. So it's like Iron Mike, and Iron Mike is no fool.
No, he's not.
He lets Skizzo have that power for a reason. And my idea is that it's probably because Iron Mike knows that his idealistic views are a little airy-fairy, a little too unattainable. And he needs that balance, that yin and yang, like you say. He needs someone who is much more of a realist and someone who can tell him when it's bullshit. Like, oh yeah, Iron Mike, great idea, not gonna fucking work in the real world.
Yeah.
Like he needs that balance.
Yeah, you don't want to surround yourself with yes men.
Right.
You want people agreeing with you because your idea is a good idea and they believe it's going to work, not because they think that they should tell you yes because that's what you want to hear.
And you also want people to challenge your ideas if it's something that is practical, that you have to, do a task and complete something, whether it's like fight something like some sort of battle, or if it's like a construction project or anything. You need more eyes on it to just look at all the potential flaws in the plan.
And World War Z, getting back to that as well, has that both in the book, in the movie and the book, and they call it the 10th man. And it was where you pose an idea to 10 people, and 9 people say, "Yeah, that's pretty sound." The 10th person is obligated to disagree. So in World War Z, when the intel was going out talking about zombies, attacks of uprising of the undead, the 9 people were saying, yes, this must be code. They can't possibly mean zombies. They can't possibly mean the undead. And it was the 10th man, it was his obligation to say, no, they literally do mean zombies. And so it was his objective, his goal to look at that where, as unrealistic as it may be, that was what he needed to argue and what he needed to defend. So you have 9 yes men and you have that one no man. And you can't just ignore the no man because the 9 guys say yes. Mm-hmm. You have to listen to the no man because that's his job.
And that's his use. Like his use is to point out the opposite, to force you to reevaluate what you think you're seeing.
What is wrong with my plan?
Make you think maybe what I think I'm seeing is not what is actually there.
Yes. Maybe they really are zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's Skizzo. He does not refrain from butting heads with Mike. You see that. The first thing you learn is when Deacon is taking Lisa to Ricky, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Skizzo. If he gives you any trouble, you talk to Ricky. Well, no, you talk to Addie, the cat's doctor." So that's your first inclination that Skizzo's
Is the sort of
something's
person
up.
who would give someone trouble.
Yes. And then when you're sneaking into camp, Skizzo and Mike are two of the folks who can catch you when you're sneaking into Lost Lake. And Skizzo is not holding back from speaking his mind to Mike. Mike mentions that, yeah, look, Addie doesn't like you snooping around her shit when they're at the infirmary. And Skizzo is like, yeah, look, you said it, not me, and blowing him off. But he's certainly not averse to speaking his mind around Mike.
Yeah.
So was Mike still wrong to put him in that position, or did he do the right thing in putting him in that position? And what is Skizzo's position?
That is a good question. I was going to say, I think one of the reasons why Mike also put him in charge is because he knows that Mike is the sort of guy that a lot of people obviously look up to and respect and think, of him kind of like, say, as a father figure. But I think some people are probably going to see through that, or not see through it, but have a different opinion, maybe not want a father figure. Like, you're not my fucking dad. Who the fuck are you? That maybe don't appreciate his personality. And those kinds of people maybe would listen more to someone like Skizzo. Or be, Skizzo kind of speaks a different language. And so if you have someone coming in who's maybe, a little more rough around the edges, or just the sort of person who doesn't like authority or something like that, like Skizzo can kind of know how to talk to them. Whereas Mike might come across too much like stern dad, and it's like, oh yeah, dad, sure.
He's more the authoritarian from their perspective.
Right.
And Skizzo is perhaps their voice. And in that, when they see Skizzo talking back, so to speak, to Mike, and Mike listening, Mike giving him his ear, they perhaps see themselves as being listened to, even if it's not them. It's Skizzo, but Skizzo is saying what they want to say, and Mike is listening. So I think I brought it up in one of Rex's streams that you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And it's, but not like that, not literally that close. But is Skizzo Mike's enemy? I think Mike doesn't see him as an enemy, but maybe Skizzo sees Mike as his enemy.
I think Skizzo is the sort of person that sees everyone as, if not an enemy, a potential enemy.
Yes.
He's constantly, there's actually reference in one of the, hang on, let me get my notes. So Deke, in one of his little journal entries, I call them, when you go into the mission log, when you finished a mission, go into the mission log, and Deke will have written in his thoughts on it after you've completed it. And he says about Skizzo,
little snippet LPT there. Do that. Go to the mission logs. Check the mission logs.
Yeah.
Find the additional information. Don't just play the game. Look at this additional information. There's more than just surface story.
The mission logs
Back to you, Claire.
give you sorry to talk over you. The mission logs give you so much. So much opinion and point of view of the characters. I've really gotten into reading those. I spend a lot of time reading through them, specifically for planning out these podcast episodes. But I was going to say about Deacon's opinion of Skizzo is he says that Skizzo doesn't trust others enough versus Ricky, who trusts too much. So Skizzo is very untrusting of other people, but it's also bad to be too trusting. And so again, you have that yin and yang, that balance of Skizzo is, untrusting and sees everyone as potentially being the enemy. But like you say, you need that no man. You need that 10th man, that guy whose job it is to look at things that way, because you have Ricky, who trusts too much, who wouldn't see a threat coming. And Iron Mike, who's kind of sort of like Ricky, he's an idealist and he's so focused on this goal of rebuilding and surviving isn't living and we've got to have laws and justice. He's a man who just believes in justice. And he's blinded by his need to stick to that because he needs redemption for himself. He needs to change himself into a man who believes in justice because he knows just a couple of years ago, he wasn't that man. And he got a lot of people killed.
Yes. A lot of people killed.
Yeah. So let's talk about Skizzo's role at Lost Lake. Because you said he's a lot more than just the head of security.
Yes. So, yeah, he's head of security, but he's assigning duties to people. He tries to He wants Deacon to go pull rippers from the marsh.
Marsh duty.
Iron Mike says that Skizzo's got me on marsh duty. Why is your head of security assigning duties to everyone? Why is your head of security doing that? That's not his job. Your head of security should be training the security staff, should be making sure that they're trained, that they're active, that they're physically fit.
They're doing what they're supposed to do. They have shifts.
Yeah, not the entire camp. He's not responsible. Well, he is responsible for everyone in the camp, but he's responsible for keeping them safe.
Mm-hmm.
He's not responsible for assigning duties to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He's at the farm. He's at the farm cheerleading. Come on, folks. Come on. Keep on working. Keep it up. We don't work. We don't eat. Why is your head of security standing in the middle of the field cheerleading? Is there not enough work for the head of security? And then, I'm sending Skizzo to negotiate with Carlos and the Rippers. Okay, yeah, it's security related. But this is your right-hand man. And if he's your head of security, he knows everything about your camp. He knows the ins and outs. He knows where the weak points are. He knows the security details, the shifts. You don't send that guy to your hostile neighbor who has already attacked you, repeatedly attacked you. You don't send that guy. You send, I don't know that I would send Ricky. Ricky would probably be good. I don't know if I'm seeing something in Carlos that's not there, but I don't feel like Carlos would respect Ricky.
Right.
For some reason, I feel like Carlos would not respect any negotiator who was not a man. It is something about his character that I get, that you can't send Ricky. You certainly wouldn't send your camp doctor in Addie. It would have to be someone else, but it certainly should not have been Skizzo.
I don't think you'd want to send a woman, I mean, not to be sexist, but and not to say that a woman couldn't hold her own in a negotiation or in a essentially military type situation, but this isn't you can't trust what they're going to do. And
no,
it would feel wrong to send someone who is I'm really trying to figure out a way to word this, because I don't want to sound sexist and like, a woman couldn't hold her own, because obviously, I mean, I'm a woman. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it just seems like you would be inviting a worse situation for that person that you are sending. It would feel like they would be more vulnerable to not being taken seriously if the guys are just fucking sexist assholes, but also it's the post-apocalypse. Rape is very much a thing, and
people are doing shitty things. Yes,
and it's shitty people have survived, and really shitty. This is a group of really fucking shitty people because they're constantly attacking other camps. You wouldn't want to send someone vulnerable into that. And maybe that is why he sends Skizzo. Maybe he's like, you know what? This guy is trying to, do too much. Maybe maybe he does want to get rid of him. I don't think that's the case, but maybe he just
No.
thinks Skizzo is the only person they have who could actually hold their own. And of course, we
Mhm.
find out that Skizzo, negotiates a deal that it's not what Mike sent him
Not the
there to
deal
do.
that Mike.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Skizzo is really one of the few people left that really do have the gift of the gab. Like, he really is good at talking people around to his point of view. He even convinces Deacon, and he convinced me. That's why he's one of my favorite characters in the game. Just, I know he's a villain, but he's a very convincing guy. Like, he does
Right.
have that ability to get you to believe him. So if you're going to send anyone, like, out of all the people at Lost Lake, he is probably the only person who could actually negotiate a treaty because he is smart.
With
He
a barrel of
plays
monkeys
dumb.
whacked out on PCP. Yep.
Yeah, he would have them wrapped around his little finger. And that's kind of what he sort of does because he goes and does a deal with Carlos. I'll give you Deacon and Boozer. And then when that goes wrong, he still manages to get out of it at Lost Lake.
Yeah.
He still has Iron Mike let him go, and he gets away with it. And he's still, in that scene when they come back and, Deacon is like, this fucking asshole sold me out. Skizzo is almost in that scene like he believes he's on Iron Mike's side. He's pointing his gun at the Rippers because he knows that he can weasel things and like fudge the facts so that he can still come out not looking like the worst guy in the room.
Yeah. And he does. And he
Mm-hmm.
wraps Mike around his little finger and gets Mike to release him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, Skizzo wasn't going to get a fair trial. Well, why would Mike think that? Unless Skizzo convinced him of it, which is maybe reading more into the story than what actually is there. But
Well, let's talk about that for a second because we do have a few possible answers as to why Skizzo was released and banished from Lost Lake versus having a trial. Iron Mike says in the game it's because he wouldn't have a fair trial because that's not possible, which arguably could be the case because half the camp or whatever the numbers is, a lot of people are going to be Skizzo's guys, and they're going to say no, he did what he had to do to keep Lost Lake safe. He's not guilty. He's fine. And then the other half are going to be like, fuck you. You sold out one of our own and you brought the Rippers here. Like,
yeah,
not a fucking chance. I don't know. I talked about this before on the podcast with Spornicus Rex, and he said that it would be possible to bring in outsiders from like Hot Springs or wherever to kind of form a jury of impartial people. I don't think that would be possible. I don't think anyone would be interested in doing that. I don't think like traveling from another camp to Lost Lake, that's dangerous. People
yeah,
don't generally leave the camps except for on, I mean, how many supply runs do people get lost and disappear and whatnot?
yeah. I could not see folks from Copeland's camp doing that. I mean, they're
No.
vehemently anti-government. Why would they want to do something like that?
Why would Copeland let anyone? Because you'd have to go ask Copeland's permission. Just as
Yeah,
you'd have to go ask Tucker. And Tucker's not
yeah.
going to release her slaves to go
No.
sit on a jury. Not a fucking chance.
She's not going to potentially compromise her camp security by sending security guards either.
Right.
So, yes.
So I don't think I just genuinely don't think you could set up just a fair, impartial jury.
Yeah, I think that's a valid argument. Yeah.
The words that he says are not untrue, but is there something more? Is there a deeper reason? Now, Spornicus posited that it was to keep Deacon from murdering Skizzo for Deke's own good. Because Deacon is that you can do, there's like a little bonus mission you can do, one of the white triangle, you don't have to complete it, but it's really cool if you do, like talking to Sarah's grave or
Yep.
the Colonel's speeches. You can skip them, but they do add texture to the world. You can go and taunt Skizzo when he's locked up in his the little cabin, the brig that they have, the
Yep.
little jail. You can go around the back of that and you can talk to him and you can hear him basically say like, bro, I was doing it for the good of Lost Lake. Brother, you gotta let me out of here. Like he seems like he genuinely believes his own bullshit.
Yes.
That I was actually doing this for a good reason. And that like, I don't understand why I'm getting locked up for this. And Deacon, and this actually is one of the few moments in the game where I actually really just don't like Deacon. He says something to the tune of, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tie you up, drag you up to the highway, and wait for a horde to come along.
He says that he's going to ask Mike to give Skizzo to Deacon and Booster so they can do that.
I don't know does he say he's going to ask him, or does he say...
He says he's going to ask him, but then he says, you know what? I think we're going to do that regardless of whether or not Mike agrees to it.
Right. And that's why it just seems a little... I mean, I know obviously Skizzo sold him out to Carlos knowing that Carlos wanted to kill him. Although we don't know that Skizzo knew that. I mean, it's pretty much... what else would you want him for?
Yeah.
Take him out to dinner? Not likely.
I mean, considering the mission where they go in looking for is it the det cord? Because they've already got the TNT.
Yeah.
So they go into Iron Butte for the det cord, and they go past the woman that's been tortured, and Deacon Mercy kills her. It should be obvious at that point. I mean, as blind as you could be, knowing that you're going to be turning Deacon over, and Skizzo knows that the Rippers are the ones responsible for Booster's arm. You would have to know why Carlos wants Deacon and Booster, and it's not for anything good. And as blind as you could be, having seen that woman and knowing what they did to Booster, you know what's going to happen to Deacon and Booster if Carlos gets a hold of him.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because Jason Spizak, who played Skizzo, when I interviewed him in episode 11, he mentions that scene right before the Rippers show up to take Deacon. He was acting it like he had an emotional moment, like Skizzo was having an emotional moment where he was faced with a choice. Like internally, like there's no dialogue, but he is acting it like he realizes this is the last chance to turn back. I am making a choice right now to continue to give Deacon to the Rippers. Because right up until that last minute when he goes through that door, he could say, hey, Deke, what's up? Let's go back out the way we came. He could just turn around and go back out the other way. And they could sneak back out and take the det cord back to Lost Lake and blow up the caves, and no one would know. Well, I mean, the Rippers, he knows the Rippers are going to come anyway to Lost Lake. That's why he's doing it. And Jason Spizak said that he was even crying in that moment, like just a little bit, like shedding a little tear. Like you can't really see it in the animation, but his eyes were watering because he was bringing a real fucking emotional moment, like a moment of choice, of weight to Skizzo, where Skizzo does fucking know what he's doing. And he is kind of tormented by it because he has actually come to like Deacon.
Yeah.
He does look up to Deacon. I don't know if he looks up to him, but he respects him. I think when he calls Deacon brother and bro, I think Skizzo means it. I don't think it's sarcastic. I don't think he's like, oh yeah, bro, like he says to everyone. I think he actually does respect Deacon. Yeah. And that's why he has a little moment where he's like, fuck, can I do this? Should I do this?
Yeah, if you rewatch that moment too, I've certainly felt that as they're heading towards the door. Mm-hmm. And Deacon is praising him. Deacon is saying, you know, look, I know you weren't happy, but and he's praising Skizzo, saying, look, thanks and everything like that. Thanks for giving us a chance. Thanks for not sending us out. And Skizzo, I get the feeling Skizzo is genuinely feeling guilty about, he knows he's about to turn Deacon over, but he feels guilty about it. And yeah, Jason Spizak's voice acting certainly comes through because you really, if you can watch that open-mindedly, with an open mind towards what Skizzo is doing, you can tell that there is that moral weight on him. He's still going to go ahead with it, but he's feeling terrible about doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not helping that Deacon is opening up to him. That is really weighing on him heavily. It's like, he's like, no, it's kind of like, just shut up. Just let me betray you. I don't need to hear this shit right now.
Yeah, don't make me like you right now.
Yeah.
Make me hate you right now, and this will be a whole lot easier.
Yeah. And it really comes through. So he definitely did a great job with that, I think.
Yeah.
Regarding turning and going out the back door, there's a lot of rippers. I don't think Carlos would have put rippers around the front door, just the front door. I think they would have surrounded that warehouse. Regardless of which way they came out, they were going to run into rippers.
Or, I mean, he could have just paused and said, wait, do you hear that? Let's look out the window before we go outside. I think I heard a noise.
Yeah.
And then being like, okay, there's rippers here.
Shit.
Let's shoot our way out or see if there's something we could do. You know, because he knows, or I assume he knows that Deacon was in the military. He knows how good Deacon is in battles.
Well, they've already been into the mine. They've already,
right.
Yeah.
So he can just, and he basically just like cowers behind Deke, so he could be like, Deke, go take them all out, and then like I'll bring up the rear.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to the banishment, Skizzo, because there's two more possible reasons for Iron Mike banishing and not giving Skizzo a trial.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on Deacon taunting Skizzo. Even if you don't do that, it's the fact that it's there means even if you don't do it, it's still part of the story. So even if you didn't do it in your story, it still happened.
It's still canon.
It's still canon, and that's why Skizzo is so pissed at Deacon when they meet up later.
Right.
And Skizzo's not, oh my God, hey, Deke, geez, dude, hey.
Bro, you survived.
Yeah,
what are you doing here?
No, Skizzo immediately seizes the upper hand and...
immediately, the first word out of his mouth is traitor.
Traitor, yes. So, yeah, and that's why. It's because of what Deacon did to him, that taunting at the back of the cabin.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe he thinks I wanted a fair trial because I know I would have been fine because I know I did the right thing, and I know that enough people in the camp are going to see, and I'm going to be able to convince Iron Mike that I did the right thing, and I'll get put back in my position of power.
He probably could have. He only needed to convince, assuming he had 6 from one side and 6 from the other, he only needed to convince the 6. Yeah. I doubt they needed all 12. I doubt Mike would do that. Mike's trial would be, look, if you've got 7 saying not guilty, that would probably be enough for Mike.
Yeah, so he's got 6 on his side. He only needs to convince 1 out of 6. And Skizzo is good. Which
gets back to, no, he wouldn't have got a fair trial.
But is that a fair trial? I mean, if you want to get down to it, like that's, if you have a jury of 12 people and you only need the majority, like, is that unfair?
Yeah, that's semantics.
Yeah. So my 2 theories, and these are the 2 that I believe the most. I don't know how much weight I put into Rex's idea of Iron Mike letting Skizzo go to prevent Deacon from stepping off of his redemption arc. I think that either it's a death sentence in disguise for Skizzo, or at least the best possible outcome for Lost Lake. Like, we can't have you at Lost Lake. You are a liability. You've got a bunch of people killed and done some really bad fucking shit, but I don't want to be responsible for another death. I don't want to have to put you on trial and hang you or shoot you or whatever. I don't want that because that's not good for the camp. And it's kind of like, is that good for the morale of Lost Lake as a whole? And for the idea of rebuilding society? Does Iron Mike want to, he wants laws and justice, but that you've also got to have mercy, balancing out justice.
Yeah.
Because if you just have justice, then sure, line him up against the wall and shoot him in the heart. He got people killed, let's kill him. But Iron Mike doesn't want to do eye for an eye. Like, I feel like he wants to be better than that. So I think he's either avoiding a death sentence, or he's in some way kind of pushing it off and being like, we're not going to kill you at Lost Lake. Lost Lake is not going to be responsible. I'm not going to be responsible for your death. Why don't you just go out and live in the shit and see what happens? And kind of let Skizzo figure Skizzo out. Like, Skizzo is not good enough to survive on his own out in the shit. He's not a drifter. That is not in his skill set whatsoever. So it is kind of a death sentence in disguise to just exile him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that theory is very sound.
Yeah, so it's kind of a way for Iron Mike to get the justice that is required and get Skizzo out of Lost Lake, but without bringing the the morale and the society of loss, like, down to a baser level of we are going to give out death sentences. It's kind of a sneaky backdoor death sentence.
He's technically judging Skizzo, even without
Right.
him getting a trial. He's pronouncing him guilty, and punishment is exile.
Yeah. Which again is a failure on his redemption arc. If Iron Mike is trying to be this idealistic version of himself, it's like, well, again, the world doesn't let you just be an idealist. You have to be in the real world for some of it. You have to get your hands dirty. And here he is getting his hands dirty, and immediately, what does he do? He basically kills someone. I mean, I know Skizzo doesn't die out in the ship, but essentially it should be a fucking death sentence for Skizzo.
It should be, yeah. But it's also potentially giving Skizzo a chance to redeem himself.
Mm-hmm.
That he's putting him out there, and it's now, okay, you need to survive or you're in time out. Get out there and have a good long think about what you did. And if you're ready to come crawling back and beg forgiveness, Mike probably would have let him back in.
Yeah, because he let Deacon back in.
Yeah, he didn't shoot him.
He said, the next time I see you, I'm going to shoot you. And then Deacon comes back, and what does Iron Mike do? Not shoot him.
Does not shoot him. Yeah.
Because he's trying to be a better person. Yeah, and also we know that Iron Mike is religious. Because we see that scene where he's praying, and he's sort of, I can't remember his exact words, but it's like, he doesn't pray very often. I don't even think he really is much of a man of faith necessarily, or of, I guess, religion in a sort of structured environment in terms of praying and worshipping, but he still obviously believes in a higher power.
Yeah, I think that's a whole discussion for another time on faith versus religion. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But for Iron Mike, he obviously believes in a higher power, so I wonder if that may play into some of it, like you say, kind of letting Skizzo go find his own redemption. And perhaps it's like, if you go out there with faith, or if a higher power is deeming you worthy of survival, like he's kind of like, I'm putting it in God's hands.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be the judge of this, so I'm gonna let God judge you through whatever actions happen to you out in the ship. If God wants you to survive and end up with the militia, then God will do that. And if he wants you to die in the sawmill or wherever, like you run into a horde or just some random freaks, like God will do that too. Like maybe that's what Iron Mike is kind of doing.
Yeah.
All right, we have talked for a long time.
We have.
I feel like this is going to be a two-parter. Is there anything else we want to go into with Iron Mike before we get done?
Iron Mike says he was wrong on his deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
He says to Deacon, I was wrong. What was he wrong about? Was he wrong about Skizzo? Was he wrong about the Rippers? Was he wrong about things that Deacon would have done?
That's actually a good point. The specifics of what he was wrong about, because he says you do what you have to do to keep the camp safe. So it's like, I guess, like, I took that to mean he's wrong about the treaty and his iron grip on his ideals.
I think it's a kung fu grip.
It's the kung fu grip on his ideals to the detriment of the safety of everyone in the camp.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is ambiguous.
Yeah. Just like his statement.
Yeah.
That 2 weeks in, the ammo was gone.
Yeah.
He's a man of secrets, is our Iron Mike.
Mm-hmm. He's a perfect metaphor for the game, just that what we said at the beginning about how it appears to be shallow, but there's actually a lot to uncover.
Yes. Not as many collectibles as Red Dead Redemption 2, but there's a lot going on in Days Gone that you're not going to find like that unless you actually go looking for it. You don't have to look for it. But there's so much more to this game than what you just see on the surface like that.
Agreed. All right. I want to go through a few things before we get done. Every Tuesday night, you can find me on the Spornicus Rex YouTube channel for a collaborative livestream playthrough of Days Gone. He goes into the gameplay tactics and strategy. I discuss the story and the characters and all the amazing details of the game, basically everything I love to talk about on this podcast. You can watch live on the Spornicus Rex YouTube channel every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific. And if you can't tune in live, the streams are still available to watch afterwards. You can support the Days Gone podcast by leaving us a review or giving us a thumbs up. That really helps the algorithm do its thing so more people can find the show. And if you have friends who play Days Gone, please let them know about the podcast and perhaps give us a share on social media. You can also show your support by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/daysgonepod, where you can throw a little money in the tip jar if you're feeling generous. That really helps me with the overhead costs of running the show. And I want to give a shout out to Lena, Kellen, and Ian, who all bought me coffees this week. Thank you, guys. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been so much fun.
Claire, thank you. It has. A lot more enjoyable. I don't want to say more so than I thought it would have been, but...
You came in with low expectations.
I wouldn't even say that. No.
Why don't you just go back to your Marvel Bejeweled game, whatever it is?
Or Days Gone. I did make a pledge that I would probably start it. I haven't done it yet. That I would probably start another game of Days Gone before the end of the year.
Do it. Just a few days left. Do it.
There is a few days left, but that Ghost of Tsushima Legends is kind of calling my name lately too. But
you know what I always say? Why not both?
Why not both? Yes. Life's too short just to play one game.
Exactly. You can email me your thoughts, comments, opinions, and counter-arguments at daysgonepod@gmail.com. You can also find me moderating the Days Gone subreddit. Thanks for listening. Weaver out.